today is all about the Children's Aid Society of Ottawa. And I'm really thrilled to welcome to the show Kelly Raymond, the Executive Director. How are you, Kelly?
Doing very well. Yourself?
I'm really, really good. And I think about the opportunity over this last 19, 20 months for many people to reach out to CAS during this time. Has it been challenging, Kelly?
I think the COVID-19 pandemic certainly presented the Children's Aid Society of Ottawa, kind of the social workers and managers in child protection with what I'd like to call complex practical and moral dilemmas about how to respond to children, youth, and families with social distancing. Adaptive transformation and resilience are probably key terms that come to mind. During the past 19 months, the child protection staff have really exercised their creativity and innovation. When you think pre-pandemic, families were met in their homes, and that wasn't a possibility during COVID. So assessment of child and youth well-being had to be changed. And so taking the work outside of people's homes into the community while practicing safe distancing, wearing full protective gear, that was certainly part of the innovation and creativity that staff demonstrated.
Kelly, it's really an important piece of the puzzle in terms of families during this time. We know many families were really stretched during this time and in many ways probably need you more now than ever.
Yeah, I think what was highlighted during the pandemic is that children, youth, and families that we serve were probably amongst the most vulnerable during COVID due to, socioeconomic and identity factors. The families we serve are amongst probably the most vulnerable and most likely to live in areas of high rates of infection, and were most likely to be negatively economically affected, and so struggled with childcare, virtual schooling supports, due to challenges such as internet connectivity, confined living spaces. This in turn increased their isolation, which then, of course, created challenges to mental wellness, mental health, and stress, which is, I think, what kind of was highlighted during the past 19 months. As we transition out of, hopefully, knock on wood, out of COVID, one of the positives is that schools and daycares have reopened. And so families now can experience more stability as children and youth return to schools, return to daycares, which is a protective environment for children. Mm-hmm. That's one of three where children tend to thrive: school, after-school neighborhood activities, and in the homes. And sometimes in the homes, that's where we are called in to provide, to help the families provide more safety.
Kelly, was it challenging for you to receive this information regarding the pandemic and know that maybe there were situations where children didn't have an outlet to share, that there maybe was challenges in the home? Did that worry you?
It did worry us at the beginning, but I think the Ottawa community has strong relationships with community partners and individuals within the community. We all came together, and we being service providers from mental health, developmental services, the hospitals, police, public health, we were all able to rally our support together, leverage each other's strengths, and how we were going to provide support to those who were most vulnerable. And so I think quickly realized within that first month, so from March to April, how can we come together and go out with common messaging? Because all of us hold near and dear the safety and well-being of children and youth. And so that was one of the strengths that, again, was highlighted during COVID and will continue post-COVID as we transition out of this phase.
Kelly, as the Executive Director for the Children's Aid Society of Ottawa, what kept you up at night during this pandemic?
I think the level of stress, uncertainty, and challenges to mental wellness clearly kept me up. how were we going to ensure that children and youth were seen, were safe, were engaged, active, and that the families who were struggling most would have access to the support. That's what kept me up at night.
Mm-hmm. And let's talk about the future, Kelly, because we know, as you said, we're hopefully on the other side of this, and we're looking forward. How are you looking forward at the Children's Aid Society of Ottawa?
So again, working with our community partners, because we know coming out of this that children, youth, and families have struggled, and have struggled in the areas of mental health, addictions, families who have a young person diagnosed with a complex or special need, trying to access a necessary service. That I think that's where our next kind of focus is on how to ensure those appropriate referrals to the appropriate service to address and mitigate for the impacts of COVID. Certainly our school partnerships will be critical to truly assess what kinds of supports and how to best tailor a treatment plan for the children and youth who've been away from schools for a period of time. What will they need and how long will they need those supports will certainly be very critical.
Kelly, how long do you think it'll take for us to fully recover from a child welfare perspective in regards to the pandemic?
It's a good question. I don't think we've never experienced a pandemic like this before. When you think of previous pandemics, research would say that it was up to a year, up to 2 years in certain circumstances. Given these past 19 months of isolation and isolation from networks, from supports, and from, of course, thriving environments, I'm going to guess it's probably another year or two as we kind of rebuild our services, ensure that there's enough staffing to respond to the increased need, easily a year or two. And as we figure out what types of services are going to be most helpful and beneficial to the families we work with, that's going to be critical. And that'll take time to do that assessment as we phase out of COVID.
And we know, of course, a wonderful partner is the Children's Aid Foundation of Ottawa. We're going to be speaking with a number of representatives throughout today's show. Kelly, talk to me about the importance of this foundation.
So the foundation was critical, especially during COVID. We knew that we had families who did not have access to the kind of technical supports that their children and youth needed to be online, to participate in school activities. Some community organizations were providing online or virtual types of support, be it for mental health, addictions. Families didn't have that connection or those tools. The foundation was critical. When we think about the children and youth who were in our care system and were about to transition, meaning they were about to exit child welfare care into adulthood, who were their support networks and how would they connect knowing that work environments had been restricted, so accessing job opportunities were significantly limited. The foundation, again, was critical in getting access to necessary funds and subsidies to help support transition-type activities for those young people who were in our care system. Now, those young people did not exit during COVID, and the foundation was extremely helpful in accessing subsidies and grants that would allow us to provide activities and engagement supports for those young people. When we think about summer camps, the foundation pre-pandemic, very beneficial in, again, getting funds to allow families to provide opportunities for their young people to participate in day camps, overnight camps. With the pandemic, that was limited. That was not possible. And so these summer camp type programs were offering more virtual camps. And so again, the foundation was extremely helpful in that area. The foundation pooled their funds together to create activity kits for families who didn't have the means to engage their young people in activities such as game nights or other kind of arts and crafts.
I understand you were involved in the Anyway fundraiser.
Yes. And so the Anyway fundraiser, two of our staff took it upon themselves to raise funds for the families that are involved in child welfare. And those funds were geared towards these activity kits. And then the Anyway fundraiser is you either walk, bike, crawl, any means of transportation, scooter if you have one. It's a 30K event geared towards, again, raising funds for families that are in need and are involved in child welfare.
That's fantastic. I love hearing the executive director getting involved in the foundation's work. That's great. It's fantastic.
I'll be crawling for sure.
That's amazing. That's awesome. You'll just do it any way you can, obviously.
That's right.
That's great. Thank you so much for joining us today. Kelly Raymond is the executive director of the Children's Aid Society of Ottawa. Thanks so much, Kelly.
Thank you.
And when we come back, we're going to speak to a number of representatives from the Children's Aid Foundation of Ottawa. A little bit later in the show, we're going to speak with Walter Noble, and he is the executive director of the foundation. We're also going to speak with a youth who's also received a bursary. We're going to get a chance to chat with Charlie, and we look forward to sharing all of the stories from the Children's Aid Foundation of Ottawa with you today on An Hour to Give. Welcome back to An Hour to Give. We're speaking about the Children's Aid Foundation of Ottawa, and I'm now joined by Jennifer Deavy. Hi, Jennifer.
Hello.
Jennifer, I understand that you're a child protection worker with the Children's Aid Society of Ottawa. That's quite a big job.
Yeah, that's what it is.
How long have you been doing this work, Jennifer?
So I've been working at the Children's Aid Society for going on 20.
Wow, you would impact so many families and so many children over your incredible career. That's an incredible long time to work at a organization for sure.
Yeah, it catches up. You don't realize how fast time goes.
Absolutely. And we know that the Children's Aid Foundation of Ottawa is making an incredible impact on the work that you do as well. How does it impact you when it comes to the funds that are really sent down from the foundation to help the children and families in your care?
Oh, the foundation is wonderful. They implement so many programs that are helpful to us as workers, but also to the kids and youth that we deal with. For example, they have their Dare to Dream program. It's a bursary-based program which allows youth to attend university largely debt-free as a result of the great fundraising they've been able to do for that program. I personally have had multiple success stories of young people that probably would not have been able to afford to go to university any other way, or college, or even trades programs too. It's not just for the youth in university. And as a result, they are reaching their dreams. They are able to have professions and, work in satisfying careers that, again, they might not have ever have even dreamed of doing previously.
And Jennifer, when they hear about this type of bursary, what's the reaction of the children?
They're usually super surprised. We never tell them in advance how much money they may get because it depends each year on how much is raised. And I've had youth that have gotten sums of like $5,000, and they just are like, oh my goodness, the community is just giving me this. Do I have to pay it back? They're usually in disbelief that it's just a gift for them to go to school. So they're usually very humbled by the experience.
It is an amazing community we live in for sure. And when you heard about the foundation and, of course, all the great work that's being done there, and you had an opportunity to actually see the people's lives that are impacted, do you often think about the donors that have made that commitment?
Yeah, I do. And it's kind of it's a really direct way of helping our youth because the money goes right towards them in some very practical ways. I work with a lot of young people that are transitioning out of our care and moving into their own apartments, and some very important pieces are done with the foundation around, for example, giving them the deposit for rent. Like, that's a lot of money for a young person to come up with, which would impact their ability to rent a place if they don't have the deposit. So something as direct as that money goes directly to paying that first month's rent so that youth can have housing is such a huge impact, and something that would be really difficult to do otherwise. They've also made connections with us, supporting us with gift cards to, say, IKEA. So those youth not only are moving into their first place, but they're actually able to purchase nice furniture to live in homes that they're proud of and they feel comfortable in when they're transitioning out of our care. And a lot of these things are things that parents might do for their own children, but often these children that have been with us in the Children's Aid Society's care, they don't have that. And so the donors are actually sort of acting as a support to us workers to be able to provide them those things that we want to provide our own children.
Oh, that's beautiful. How has COVID-19 been for you, Jennifer, in relation to your work?
It's been very challenging. I think we've all been very, very worried about our youth and the families we've served. They've been very isolated. They've been lonely. A lot of programs weren't available to them. We were pretty much the only agency that was going still face-to-face and meeting with our clients. And so almost like the last line of defense, like when they didn't have anything else, they didn't have counseling appointments in real life. They didn't have any humans to connect with. We were kind of it. And so there was a lot of responsibility placed on us, not only being unsure of whether or not we would be contaminated by COVID-19. We didn't know what that would look like, and we did really a lot of PPE work, making sure we were going in protected. But still, the rest of the world was kind of shut down, waiting at home, and we were out there in the community seeing our clients. It was a little bit scary, but we also knew that, they were so isolated and they just needed that human contact, and the kids needed to know that we were there to ensure their safety. So I felt like there was a lot of responsibility and a lot of risk that we were assuming, but it was for the better of the community.
Wow, absolutely. Just hearing you share your experiences from this time, I can imagine it was a difficult period for you. And when we think about the foundation and everything that they're doing, it must be one of those moments where there's some joy. You've worked with a family maybe for a really long time, and then you're able to provide some funds to a child or to a family for them to be able to do something that maybe wasn't on their radar at all.
Absolutely. Yes. I can give an example. Just this last week, I had a young person that was able to get an apartment of her own, and I made the referral to the furniture bank, which luckily we were able to successfully get her furniture. But the delivery fee was not something that she was expecting to incur, and it was a lot of money. It was $270. And the barrier that could have presented, but was erased by the foundation, made that such a simple thing. I was able to just get the foundation to help us pay that amount, and the furniture was delivered right to her house. So where she would have struggled with, how do I do this now? Great, I've got furniture, but how do I get it to my house? Again, tapping into the foundation and counting on them to sort of help us with those barriers and just remove them. It not only helps the youth, but it helps us as workers. It's just one less thing that we have to try and sort out and figure out, how do we do this? How do we get furniture from A to B?
For sure.
It's very practical, very specific tasks that become much more simple.
And the example you used is such an important one, because some of us would just sort of take for granted to have that money or to be able to have a connection to make that happen. But once again, the foundation donors are really stepping up there to help a young lady really change her life.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Jennifer, when you started to work many, many years ago at the Children's Aid Society of Ottawa, how have things changed?
Oh, boy. Things have changed so drastically. It's hard to even put it in words. I mean, just the impact of social media and, the good and the bad that has come from our reliance on devices, computers, and communications. It's such a fast world now. We have access to so much at our fingertips, and as much as that's made it great, it's also put a lot of stress and pressure and speed on how we do things. Everything's at a moment's notice, right? People have lost that patience that back in the day, if you'd have to leave a voicemail and wait for someone to call you, and now you don't return a call. You've got a text message, or you've got a message through Facebook, or you've got a Teams message, or it's just so much, and it's so fast that I think that's really, it's added a lot of pressure to our young people. They don't really know how to wait for things to happen because things just happen so quickly. Mm-hmm. And the exposure that they have to, so much. I mean, the pressure through social media and the images and wanting to live up to an image and an Instagram perfect world and those kinds of things. Those are things that didn't even enter our sphere 15 years ago, it's really taken off.
Mm-hmm. If you could go back in time, Jennifer, and tell yourself something 15, 20 years ago about the work that you would be doing, what would you say to yourself?
I think that the advantage of having worked so long in the field is that I have success stories of people that are now adults that have reached back and said, the Children's Aid Society changed my life for the better because of this. Or I've seen them walk through some really challenging times in their life and come out on the other side as productive, happy individuals. I probably wouldn't have known that 15, 20 years ago because those stories just wouldn't have been there yet. So if you look at the time that CAS is involved in a family in a sort of micro level, just the time we're involved, it probably doesn't lend credibility to the work in the macro level, backing it up and seeing these people come back to us later saying, that conversation or that short period of time in my life changed my life A, B, C, D wise. So I think that would be my message: is be patient. The positive outcomes aren't always right there. Sometimes they take years for you to find out about them. And those stories are really rewarding when they come.
In our last 30 seconds together, Jennifer, what would you say to donors that have stepped up for the Children's Aid Foundation of Ottawa?
I would say thank you from the bottom of my heart. It's unfortunate that donors don't get to see the reactions of the young people or the families when they get the things that they get, the kids that have come back with happy faces from camp, or seeing the young person walk across the stage graduating with their diploma or certificate. We get to see that, and unfortunately, we're not the ones necessarily donating the money. So I wish that they had the ability to see that firsthand expression that we see, but to trust that it's there, and even if the young people aren't able to put into words to the donors, it is something that we experience on their behalf, and I certainly would like to share that with them.
Beautifully said. Jennifer Deavy is a child protection worker with the Children's Aid Society of Ottawa. We value your time today, Jennifer. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we're going to continue our conversation today about the Children's Aid Foundation of Ottawa. Stay with us. We're going to hear from quite an interesting young lady named Charlie. Stay with us here on An Hour to Give. And we are back on An Hour to Give talking about the Children's Aid Foundation of Ottawa. And it is my honor to welcome Charlie to the show. Hi, Charlie.
Hi.
Charlie, I understand that you are a recipient of a Dare to Dream Bursary.
Yeah, I've been a recipient for the last few years that I've been in school.
And what do you do with the bursary money?
Well, it helps fund my post-secondary.
And what are you taking, Charlie?
I'm currently studying social work at Carleton.
Excellent. And has your experience with the Children's Aid Foundation of Ottawa been a good one in terms of being able to support you through your educational dreams?
Well, yes, it absolutely has definitely supported me. That's a good way to describe it. In a lot of ways, yeah.
And when you think about going to university and going to Carleton, was it always something that was on your radar, Charlie?
No, I'll be honest. I didn't actually think that I would be able to go to university just because I didn't think that I was able to do it. But now that I'm in my 4th year, it's kind of shocking. I think back to that person a lot. And with the help of the Dare to Dream Foundation, they've done a lot in supporting me.
Do you remember when you were first told that there may be some monies to help you further your education?
Yes, I do.
Tell me about that moment.
I was in high school, actually, and we were applying. Well, people were talking about applying to school. And for youth in care, they often age out. If you do a 4-year degree, you'll age out usually at 21. And so if you do the math, by the time you graduate, you actually have 1 year left of school before you age out. And so when they were like, oh, no, the foundation can actually help that year and help during that buffer year, it kind of gave some comfort to know that I wouldn't be left high and dry during my last year of university.
It's pretty incredible. I love the fact you've chosen the social work program. I have a lot of respect for people that do that work for sure.
Yeah, it's a fun field for sure. There's lots of opportunities.
And when you think about the Children's Aid Foundation of Ottawa, of course, it takes really a whole community to make a foundation work. Lots of donors donate in various different ways. Do you often think about the donors that have helped you get to where you are today?
Yeah, I actually think about them a lot. And I think about just how generous they are to want to help youth in care and want to help to see people succeed in the community. People they don't even know, and they value a degree, like a university degree, and they're able to work and donate to support them. And they've never met me. They just want to help.
And what if one of them was listening right now? What would you say to them?
I would say, thank you. I don't think that they ever get the opportunity to see how much they've supported youth in care. Not only with the Dare to Dream Bursary, but with all of the work that the foundation does. That's all done through the donors. That's the money that they get. And to be able to give the opportunities to youth in care, like myself and like some of my peers who I know who are also in care, I don't think they ever get the opportunity to see how much impact it has on the youth and children as well.
If we were to, let's say, chat in a decade from now, 10 years from now, you and I, Charlie, are going to sit down and have another conversation. What do you think you'd say about the Children's Aid Foundation of Ottawa?
Well, I imagine that I would be kind of on my way in life. I hope that I would have everything kind of figured out by then. But I definitely think the impact of getting a university degree and the supports, there's other supports that the Children's Aid Foundation has for us as well. It definitely helps kind of steer you in the right direction and really changes the course, the path that you take, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to do, I wouldn't be able to go to university without them, and I wouldn't be able to support myself as much as I can now without the help of those donors. And so I would imagine in 10 years from now, I'd be in a very different place now, but a much better place than I would be if I didn't have the support of the Dare to Dream Foundation.
There's times where you just talk to somebody. I do literally thousands of interviews a year, and there's times where you just hear someone's voice and you just think, they're going places. I just think someday I'm going to be like, I knew Charlie when?
When she was a kid.
Do you feel that way about your own trajectory?
About myself or about
you?
Yeah, I definitely think it'll be interesting to look back on who I am now for sure. Even looking back at who I was when I was younger, I definitely see a total shift, and I hope that it continues to shift in the direction it's going, because I think it's positive.
Has the pandemic been hard on you, Charlie?
Yes, I would say the pandemic has been challenging. Like, I feel like it has been for everybody.
And in what way for you?
Well, I was able to continue working at the organization that I work for. And I found that working there was obviously more stress on the workload. You know, our organization lost more staff than they would have liked to. So the staff that were working were overworked. And definitely with school being transferred to online, that was really challenging. Just like adapting to the whole environment. And also, youth in care often don't have many supports. So definitely finding people to support me in ways that, you know, a normal family would was super important for me.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like a lot of people don't recognize that for youth in care.
Yeah, I can imagine that would be obviously very difficult, Charlie. How do you sort of work through that on a daily basis?
Well, I've actually been very grateful, and I've been very resourceful, and I've been able to find people in my community that have been able to help support me in ways that, you know, other people would have other members of their family supporting them.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like you've built up quite a lovely network for yourself, which is lovely. The Children's Aid Foundation of Ottawa, of course, helping you with some of those financial needs. In what other way has the foundation assisted?
Well, the foundation has also assisted at the beginning of the pandemic. I wanted a hobby, and they obviously everyone kind of wanted a hobby at the beginning of the pandemic. But for me, it was really challenging because I was doing school at home and I was living in my apartment. And I reached out to Walter, the ED of the foundation, and he was able to support me in getting me signed up for a pottery class, actually, which is pretty cool. I don't know if my skills are up to par, but it was definitely a really cool skill to learn at that time. And during the pandemic, it was able to give me, able to get my mind off things, for sure.
Mm-hmm. When you're in your apartment, Charlie, and it's just you and it's quiet, what do you think about when you think about your future?
I hope I'm not in that apartment anymore.
That's the most honest answer I've received all year, by the way.
It's a very small apartment, but I hope to be doing well, like, you know, other people who may not have the challenges that other youth in care have. I hope to be getting my career on track, and I'm pretty open-minded about anything, so I don't have like a set plan. I feel like a lot of people have a set plan.
Charlie, how do you think your experience of being a youth in care will affect the work that you do maybe as a social worker in the future?
I feel like it will give me a lot of perspective. Obviously, I've kind of been through the system a little bit, kind of felt some of the challenges that people would go through. I don't actually want to work with youth in care or kids in care, but I do want to work with other vulnerable populations. And I think just that compassion for people and the ability to see someone struggling and kind of put yourself in their shoes.
Mm-hmm. That empathy is important, of course, in that work for sure. And what would you like to say to the team, the Children's Foundation of Ottawa team? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I was talking to Walter last week, I think, the ED, and we were chatting, and I was telling him that I don't think there's any way I could show my gratefulness and how much I truly appreciate the work that they've done to support kids in care like me and given us the opportunities.
It really is incredible to think about not only, of course, the day-to-day work of that team, but also all the donors, as you mentioned. It really has been wonderful. And when you think about the big event coming up, there's a big event, fundraising event coming up. What would you say to anybody that's thinking about participating in the trivia night?
Oh, the World Trivia Night. I actually volunteered at it. It's super fun, and it really challenges your knowledge on everything. But it's also a really good way to give back. You go out with your friends and have a couple drinks and try and answer some trivia, but you also are giving back to youth in care like me.
Amazing.
is the icing on the cake at that point.
I think it is too. Cherry on top. It's been an absolute pleasure to spend time with you today, Charlie. I just look forward to seeing what you can do in the future and really value the opportunity to spend time with you today.
Yeah, well, thank you for giving me a call and chatting.
Absolutely. This is Charlie, who we've been chatting with. We're going to be continuing our chat about the Children's Foundation of Ottawa. When we return, we're going to be speaking with the one and only Walter Noble. Stay with us here on An Hour to Give. As promised, Walter Noble is here from the Children's Aid Foundation of Ottawa. Welcome to An Hour to Give, Walter.
Thank you very much, Sam.
We've certainly had some interesting discussions today regarding both the Children's Aid Society of Ottawa and the Foundation. Tell me a little bit about your role, Walter.
Certainly. So our foundation, I always refer to it as the little engine that could. We're a small team of 3-4 people and been around since 1988, and it's really to help fund in 3 areas: education, youth transition, and prevention initiatives where there are no funding or partial funding from the CIS.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about your relationship. You've got an incredible story to share about your children, Walter.
Yes, certainly. As I say, I'm very passionate about the role here, and I'm so lucky to have a very supporting board as well. And I came here 7 years ago now, and the journey began 18 years ago as my wife and I being foster parents, which ended up adopting 2 children from CIS who from when they were less than a year old to now teenagers. So it's quite the journey for sure. So as I say, I'm very passionate about helping kids that are involved with child welfare and those who are in foster care and aging out.
Mm-hmm. It really is a remarkable story. I could hear that story 100 times. I think it's amazing. And what's it like to have teenagers, Walter?
Well, I always ask somebody when my kids were really young, I said, does it get any better? And they go, it's just different. And so now, 10 years later, I understand exactly what they're saying.
Right. I have a teenage daughter myself, so I get where you're coming from. Let's talk a little bit about all the great initiatives at the Foundation to ensure children are supported. What are some of the ways that people really give to the Foundation?
As I say, they're giving in those the 3 areas. Education is probably one of the top priorities, and something that obviously in this community people have a super high, a very high appreciation. Ottawa is one of the centers or cities rather in the country that has some of the highest educated people with all the research institutes and high tech and tourism and whatnot. So and again, kids that age out of care in Ontario specifically, those numbers, the graduation numbers rather of kids that are leaving foster care are half of which would be about 44% versus about 88% of the general population in the province. And then there's 5 or 6% of those that go on to post-secondary. So we're doing our best to encourage post-secondary education, at least from a financial support perspective. And we've always said we're not a handout, we're a hand up, and that's something that we often use at our board meetings. And when it comes to helping these kids, give a little hand up with finances regarding education and bursary specifically. We have a Dare to Dream Bursary program, and kids have the opportunity to have about our average bursary is around $3,000, so that really helps.
Absolutely, it does. And when I think about ways to give, there's obviously some people just give a gift annually. Some people are monthly donors. Mm-hmm. What are other ways that people get involved?
Right. So apart from sort of monetary, they can get involved as a volunteer at the Children's Aid Society. And, they have volunteer drivers to drive, the kids to family visits back and forth from foster homes. There's also tutoring. So they have 150 people volunteering on tutoring. Obviously, it's all virtual now. And from our foundation perspective, we have a number of people that volunteer each year at our World Trivia event, which next year will be live in person, I believe. But that's a huge event that we do in November each year. So because it's online, no volunteers needed, but we usually get about 70 people, and some of the youth come out to help out.
Well, that sounds like a lot of fun. Can people still register, Walter?
For that, World Trivia, absolutely. WorldTriviaNight.com, WorldTriviaNight.com. And we've got just close to 50 teams registered to date, and we're about a month out, and we're expecting another 40 to 50 teams. And our goal is to net over $50,000 for these kids in programs like Dare to Dream, and send kids to summer camp and helping with some of the youth transition programs as well.
Mm-hmm. I asked a little bit earlier of a couple of our guests how challenging the pandemic has been for them. Certainly it's been challenging to raise money in this climate. How has it been for you?
It has definitely been a challenge, but interesting enough, as soon as when the pandemic first hit back in March last year, we were right away talking to the Children's Aid Society and saying, how can we help immediately? And one of the things that we're able to, and we actually got calls from our donor community to say, okay, how can I help? What are you guys doing? What do you need? And right off the bat, it was doing activity kits. So we gathered some funds to support 360 children in April and May of last year with activity kits. So this would be, coloring books, game boards, things when people are obviously essentially, staying at home. And in some cases we think, we're at home, we've got, space. Some of these families are in one-bedroom apartments, and even, a motel, room waiting for public housing, and they just needed to get their kids active somehow within their environment. So these things were deployed, a month after the pandemic started, and the feedback was just tremendous, actually.
Mm-hmm. At the beginning of the pandemic, did you look in your job description for where it was listed there that you'd be an executive director of a charity during a pandemic?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And, when it came to, we had actually an event that had sold out by March 1st, which is our Salou event. It's a wine paired dinner at the Algonquin Restaurant International, and we had 100 people booked and everything, and then we just had to think differently, and this is happening mid-May. What do we do in 6 weeks? And so we were able to turn it into a virtual event, and I'm happy to say this past spring it continued as a virtual event, and we were able to include twice as many people, so almost 200 people. So it'd be almost 90 to 100 households had all the wine and dinner delivered to them, and they logged on to a Zoom, and we had some speakers from the society and some youth that spoke about their experiences in regards to pandemic and their education, and really provided some insight into the day-to-day sort of lives of youth that are of age out of care and trying to make it on their own and getting that education. And interesting enough, people, as I say, our donor community is small but extremely generous. They stepped up. We raised the most that we have at a fundraising event in the 33-year history. So we netted $100,000 at this event when normally it would be about 30.
Wow.
So it was unbelievable.
Wow, that really gives me a lot of hope about this community and about the work that you do as well, Walter.
Well, thanks very much. It's, we're always trying to, in this climate too, reinvent ourselves. So as I'm sure other heads of charities that I've spoken to in Ottawa, when it comes to virtual versus in person, we're really rethinking our models, fundraising models. And, for this specific event, the wine pair dinner, it's interesting because the half the audience are saying, we don't want to go back to an in-person, right? And the other half are saying yes. So hybrid model might be, I think, is something that we're exploring for next year.
Mm-hmm. And where can people find out information about the trivia night and any upcoming events?
Mm-hmm. They can go to our website, which is HelpOttawaKids.ca, HelpOttawaKids.ca. And that's our main page, and on the event side, they're all listed there, and as well as all our programs. And one thing that people do, people that I talk to on a daily basis, where's the money really going? So on our website, it really has a clear distinction. Again, talking about the education initiatives and youth transition and the prevention initiatives. And when I say prevention, I mean supporting the work of the Children's Aid Society workers, the protection workers, and we're, used as another tool in their toolbox, so to speak. And whether it's a kid, that needs clothing or shoes, or wants to really play a sport, we're really fortunate to be able to provide that, and through other, through our donor community.
Mm-hmm. You've got sort of this really interesting situation for yourself where you have this opportunity to meet with these generous donors, but then you see the impact as well. You've got kind of a matchmaker position there.
Yeah, exactly. And the interesting thing is, someone would, I'll use, swimming lessons as an example. If I said I need $100 to send a child for swimming lessons for, a couple of months, it's basically, I get a call, boom, it's done. And within 24 hours, this is how that $100 donation made a difference. So that's, I think, something that donors are really looking for. And these days is really, what impact am I making directly to youth? And as many youth are in need in Ottawa, and there's many charities that are raising money for youth, and ours is very specific to children involved with child welfare.
Such an important organization in our city. You've done incredible things, Walter, and I can't believe it's been 7 years that you've been with that organization, and you really have taken it to a new level, and I'm so grateful to have followed your adventures and see all the great work that you've done.
That's great. Well, I really appreciate that, Sam. And one thing I do want to mention is next week on October the 27th is Dress Purple Day. And so this is a provincial wide initiative from the Ontario Association of Children's Aid Societies. And it's just to recognize the frontline work and work overall that child welfare professionals are doing across the province. And in Ottawa, people are going to be dressed up in purple, and we're getting a bit of a head start on Friday. We've got two amazing CIS workers who are doing a 30K sort of bike ride across the city along the bike path and raising money, and have 10 teams made up of employees from the Children's Aid Society, and our foundation has put in a team, and my board is participating in raising money, and they had a goal of 10K, and they're just surpassed that yesterday, and they're raising, right now it's tracking around 14,000, and these are just people that are frontline workers that want to make a difference, and it's just incredible. It's great. It's all for the kids.
That's amazing. Love to hear it. Walter Noble, the Executive Director for the Children's Aid Foundation of Ottawa. It has been my pleasure to spend time with all of you today. Thank you so much for listening to